Item number one, at this time we'll call the meeting to order. Agenda item number one is welcome and committee chairs meetings overview. The Division of P16 Initiative hosted a P16 Institute on February 27th, 28th, 2012 at the Doubletree Hotel in Austin. Approximately 100 public school and higher education administrators and workforce, community, and business leaders attended the P16 Institute. This was the first institute of the 2011-2012 year, designated to bring P16 regional teams of local secondary, post-secondary, and community and business partners together to assist in closing the gaps by 2015. During the P16 Institute, the Coordinating Board offered a series of sessions on P16 initiatives and P16 best practices. The P16 Institute is scheduled on June 12, 13, 2012 at the Doubletree Hotel in Austin, Texas. For information, the next P16 Council meeting will be held here at the Coordinating Boardroom on April 18, 2012 from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. The meeting will be web broadcast and available for viewing on the Coordinating Board main website. Okay, agenda number two. Consideration of adopting minutes from the December 13, 2011 Committee on Closing the Gaps meeting. May I? Motion's been made. Do I hear a second? It's been moved and seconded. All approve, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Due to conflicting schedules, we are going to take an agenda out of order. At this time, we'll move to agenda item 7A. Give me a second, guys. I'll be there. Agenda item 7A. Let's see. Agenda item 7A is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to Consolidated Annual Program Evaluation Report. Robin Zuniga, Senior Program Director in the Division of Planning and Accountability, will give a brief summary and highlight important points learned from the projects evaluated. Thank you for being here. You have the floor.
Turn your mic.
Robin, turn your mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm pleased to be here to provide you with some highlights of the 2011 Consolidated Annual Program Evaluation Report. I'm going to look at three areas that are covered in the report. First, improving student participation and success is a crucial goal to achieving the Closing the Gaps goals. The bridging programs are one set of programs the board has implemented to help underprepared students prepare for college success. These programs have been shown to make a difference. Students who participate in bridge programs enroll in college at higher rates than non-participating students, and as the chart demonstrates, they enroll in and complete their first credit-bearing mathematics course faster than a comparable group of non-participants. Over the past 4 years, THUCB staff have learned that, among other things, bridge programs that devote 9 to 12 months to planning, build strong partnerships with K through 12 schools, design a curriculum tailored to their target population, and involve faculty early in the development of the curriculum are the most successful. As we move forward, THUCB can play an important role in disseminating these lessons to other higher education institutions throughout Texas and across the nation. Improving teacher effectiveness is another important strategy for closing the gaps. Several ongoing THCB programs are directed at this effort, including the Math Science Teacher Technology Preparation Academies, the College and Career Readiness Initiative Faculty Collaboratives, and the online faculty development modules. Teachers and faculty involved with these efforts are saying that they are pleased overall, and most importantly, they indicate that they are using what they are learning in these professional development opportunities to improve their teaching. Preliminary results are showing these ongoing efforts to be effective, and the external evaluation teams are recommending that these efforts be continued and strengthened. Finally, developing a Texas culture that values a college education is another way we can help to close the gaps. Since 2008, THECB, with the support of the Federal College Access Challenge Grant, has worked with college counselors in schools and through public information campaigns to educate students and their parents about the value of a college education. Increasing the number of students who submit federal financial aid applications is a key performance indicator for these efforts. And as the chart shows, the percent of students submitting financial aid applications at schools involved in these programs have increased since the program started. As we move forward, these efforts will be continued through targeted public information campaigns such as GenTex and GradTex, and direct support for college counselors through programs such as AdviseTex. The full 2011 Consolidated Annual Program Evaluation Report containing these and other findings and individual program reports will be available on the THECB website prior to the April board meeting. In your packets, you have a copy of the executive summary and recommendations that will appear in that report. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the committee have any questions? David?
I'd just like to point out, Robin didn't mention that one of the most critical points of this evaluation is the board's put millions of dollars into these programs. And what's happened as we've gone forward is that part of the evaluation informs the staff and the board in terms of changes that should be made in programs before they continue. And so each of the programs Robin has mentioned is not exactly the same as it was when it was first funded by the board because of what's been learned from previous evaluations. And it's helped the staff have more information to make recommendations to the board in terms of which programs we should fund going forward. I also wanted to add that right now, beyond this evaluation, I've asked staff to conduct a cost-benefit analysis for all these programs to provide us more information as we go forward to the next legislative session in terms of which programs get us the most bang for the buck. So beyond even just being most effective, in some cases we might learn that one program, while the cost-benefit is a little bit more for, or the outcomes are a little bit better for one program on a cost basis, that the other program might be better to put money into because you get almost the same outcomes, but you get it for far less money.
Fred?
Thanks, Dennis. David, I'm glad to hear you say that. The one of the four areas that jumps out at me that today we really couldn't prove the value of is the teacher effectiveness initiative. Just measuring the number of visits to our professional development site doesn't tell us anything. So there is a statement in the report that more needs to be done to identify best practices and measure the impact of professional development. How are we going about that? How quickly will we get that implemented?
That's a very difficult problem, and we are looking into it. The problem is being able to tie actual student performance to teacher effectiveness, and it's a thorny issue. Also, you have to be able to make that link and compare those teachers' performance in a previous class. There are many intervening variables that make it very difficult to isolate the effect of professional development. But we are looking into other ways of doing it.
I would also like to add that that is one of the efforts that's on the TEA side of the house, SBEC, in terms of teacher performance. Dr. Barnes and I were speaking yesterday. There's a very compelling article in, I think it's Education Weekly, by Linda Darling Hammond, who is certainly a leader in teacher education and in education in general. And her one point raised what is, it's very difficult to tie a teacher to a student. There's many variables and much impact. But I think over time, with all the efforts that have taken place in aligning our work with K-12, our professional development efforts, our education of counselors, et cetera, I think over time, with the system that ultimately may result, pardon me, should begin to show us where there is impact. It's not going to happen overnight because it's a huge system. But if our faculties, who we are trying to impact, are seeing that difference, and remember, we're also impacting pre-service ed because of our work in the college and career readiness standards. So as over the next 4 years, as all this transitions in the K-12 arena, in the high school area, especially with the redesign of curriculum, the TEKS, the inclusion of the college and career readiness standards, then I think that our evaluators may have a better way to identify those variables they can look at.
The one way to do it, and I think you pinpointed the area where we have by far the weakest program evaluation. And I think we need to look, Robin, towards our pathway projects and see if those partners would work with us, because those projects actually have the ability to look specifically at performance in a way that we can't anywhere else in the state.
Well,
And
that's
so-
true. And we now have, with the new S data coming in from the new S, we have student record data. We can see grades in courses, and so we can look more specifically than we've been able to do in the past.
David, that might also be do we know how many students and teachers participate in the pathway programs?
I don't know how many that are involved in this program. I think we have to find that out. But the programs are very large. San Antonio, we've got multiple districts, 27 in the Valley, many in districts
Yeah.
in Houston. So we have a huge potential, and I think if we're able to make the connection, we will be able to.
So it'd be a significant enough number of students and teachers is what I'm getting after. But we could also, what we need, the other thing that concerns me in this area, and it could be tied in with professional development, is for lack of a better term, a growing comfort factor with the college and career readiness standards. Everybody here reads the newspapers, understands the political furor over the STAR tests. Somehow we need to use these processes to measure some growth in not just teacher awareness, but teacher comfort with, if I effectively teach this curriculum, then we won't have to teach to the test. And an end of course exam will be just what it's intended to be, a final. So if we could tie that with some way to measure just the skills or growing effectiveness of the development that we offer online, then we would have something compelling in the coming legislative session to share.
I think those are good suggestions.
Yeah, I can see ways that we could do that. And I think we'd need to expand some of what we're doing, but I think it would be much more meaningful than what we're doing now. It would be worthwhile.
Go ahead.
Well, just for $79 million, could you give us a number of students and teachers that are actually being touched or being involved or something like that you could follow
In
up
the
with?
Professional development?
Yes.
Or in the back of your final report, we have the total number of participants. Didn't we add it? You'll see by site, there's the total number of participants that have been served by different programs across the state. So that is available in the report. We'll add a total to
I don't
that.
think I have that report. Don't have the report.
Oh,
While Janelle's looking at that, Fred, I'd like to ask you a question. Do you, you made a statement, I'd like to understand it a little bit better. You're stating that we need to, you brought up teaching to the test. And what I understood you said that, and I agree, I think with what
Didn't
you
have to go
said,
to
I'm
the
just not
spreadsheet.
completely understanding it. So we don't need to teach to the test, but we need to design a curriculum and make sure faculty teach that curriculum. Is that what you're-
And that process that's been in process for quite some time, and I'm not sure.
all of our faculty development efforts focus on helping teachers become comfortable with the college and career readiness standards.
So, I mean, the intent, and I can well understand the reaction that parents and school districts are having right now, given the last several years of tax, et cetera. But the whole intent of what is now known as the STAR exams is that they simply serve as what most of us grew up with, an end-of-course final that teaches the curriculum we learned during the semester. but they're still being caught up in this controversy over teaching to the test because how school districts perceive themselves to be incentivized.
I agree with what Fred's saying, and because I see the same thing back in some of the districts that close to where I live, and I don't know whether you guys get the same questions I get from time to time in the form of criticism, I think, and a lot of it comes from faculty saying that why do we have to teach to the test? And I believe that you shouldn't be teaching to the test. You should teach the curriculum, and then you should test for outcomes. And that's not a hard concept to understand. I'm going to give a personal opinion based on my experience, is that when I get questioned as to why do they not like to teach to the test, I want to make sure that they understand that that's not what we intend or try for them. Our intentions are not for them to do that. Intentions are to vertically line the curriculum and teach the information and then test for outcomes. My personal opinion is that sometimes when they object to teaching to the test, the real objection is to a level of accountability. That's my own personal opinion. Anyone else want to ask any questions or add anything to it? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, Robin, you mentioned Gen TX, and we're going to have
Correct.
a presentation on that, but you also
Correct.
mentioned Grad TX.
Yes, if you're not familiar with that,
I'm not.
that is a program that's marketing the value of education to students that already have college credits, as many as 50 to 90 college credits, but have not received a degree, and in giving them support and encouragement to go back and finish a degree.
In what form does that take? Is that a website like Gen TX?
Yes, there is a website. It is connected with Gentex. It's called GradTex, and there's a marketing campaign. Dr. Van Davis is in charge of that program, and he could probably tell you more about the specifics, but we're also working with, at the moment, 8 institutions that are providing specific programs that target these adult degree completers, and they are featured on the website. And students can do degree audits and contact those institutions about signing up for their programs. And we are in the process of collecting data on that program at this time.
Are we marketing this to our partners in the business community to say, here's some really low-hanging fruit, you've got to work with us to identify what exactly the degrees are that you need, and we will find you people that are really low-hanging fruit?
That
And-
would be a question for Dr. Davis.
Okay.
I'm not sure all of the particulars of the program.
So
and
Grad
what
TX is
relation.
part of Gen TX, or kind of
Yes.
tied together? Okay.
Yeah, they're both part of the College Access Challenge grant.
Yeah.
Dr. Tischer, that's a good point, but the focus was to identify the students out there who had already started degrees, and to then to identify institutions that were willing to help students complete these degrees who had more than 60 college hours, that were already on a track for completion. So that second part, though, is something that we look at in terms of our work of ABE. What are the workforce needs that are out there? Not necessarily for degree completion, but in order to identify the training needs to help these individuals who are at that basic skill level develop skills that will allow them into a workforce. So it's almost like a two-pronged process. One is that person who stopped out at 90 hours and has so little to go. You know, where could I go that an institution will work with me to complete the degree that I started on?
No, I think this is a great concept. I mean, this is, as I said, low-hanging. These are people that are almost done. And Judy, what I'd like us to have is a list of the institutions that are not willing to help these students, because I can tell you that I think we would like to shine a light on them and say, what is your commitment to academic excellence and graduation that's part of our core mission? These people are almost done. You have very little that you'll have to invest in them, and then you get credit for graduating another person in the system. So what institution in the state would possibly not be committed to this?
If I could say something about this, this is a program that we, to some extent, deliberately identified a smaller number of schools that had some resources in place, experience, and were willing to put additional resources in place, essentially to help students all over the state. One of these schools is Midwestern, which has had some history in terms of getting students back to school from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so essentially at this point, it's not exactly a pilot, but sort of a pilot demonstrating how to do it for everyone in the state. And then I think we can make sure we do exactly what you're talking about. But it's not that other institutions weren't willing to do it. It was that there weren't sufficient resources initially. And
It's not ready for prime time.
That's right, but we think it's going to be.
Do you have a list of those in this report?
No, that program is still in progress and is not included in this report, but that is available. I'm sure that somebody can get that to you.
Yeah, the U.S. Department of Ed, actually, before we even got this started, made note of it because they thought it was an important program. So it's already gained some attention, even though it's just started. And as I said, our intent was to get people who had already made a commitment and had some experience with it as well to really test out the elements and get everyone else, really set the plate for everyone else so they would know exactly what they needed to do to make it work.
Actually, the list is on the website,
Okay, good.
the GradTX website, so that's good.
I'm actually aware of some of the East Texas community colleges that have taken the initiative on their own to call or contact students that have 45 hours or more and try to get them back into school to complete their associate's degree. So I'm seeing some situations in the area that I'm familiar with that are showing some interest in just doing that on their own, which I think is a good thing.
I think we're at the best place we've been. We've tried various things over the years. Susan Brown and her staff actually sent out to all the institutions lists of students who had completed X number of hours and still didn't have a degree so that they could help reach out to them. So I think we're at more of a sweet spot now in terms of making it work.
That may be what initiated the effort, is what Susan did, because I'm seeing that being done. David, do you have any?
Can I ask Susan a question? How did you identify those? Did you ask the university registrars to go into their database and say who was within 30 or 60 hours of a stem cell degree and what's their latest contact information? How did you identify these people?
Because we have the information in our databases already, we went through and calculated it semester by semester, and who hadn't been there in 1 year or 2 years, and the last school last institution they enrolled in, and said this is the number of hours they have attempted at this point, and sent it to the last school that they were enrolled in, because we don't have the addresses and that sort of thing. So we sent it to them so that they were able to follow up.
Are you targeting certain degrees?
We did it for all the students. We did for the universities. We said anybody that had over 100 hours and was not enrolled in at least a year, that we sent that information to them. For the community colleges, it was 55 hours.
So it's 55 hours for the community colleges and 100 hours for the universities.
Right.
And so those are the ones you've already done. Are we now going?
We've done it 3 or 4 different times. We just actually, there's a group in Houston, a consortium of institutions that's got private and public institutions and community colleges all involved, and we just sent them a new list. They requested it. And so we're working with them to send that. We just sent them a new list, I think, last month.
Why 100 hours? Why not 90? Assuming they have 1 year to go.
You can vary it. I mean, we add up the hours. We just track those students backwards till we find them as first time entering, and that's the number of hours.
That's a good suggestion, though, particularly if it's effective to begin with, and the number, if we see a shrinking number of candidates that have got 155, then we ought to back that down to 90 and 50 or whatever.
And we
makes
can do
sense.
that. We could easily do that.
Well,
Actually, the Houston group asked for some different cut points, and I don't remember what all they were. I think we gave it to them in groups, but I can't remember. We've done it for different institutions, different ways, depending on how they want it. So it just kind of depends.
And you know, it deals with the persistence issue and reigniting somebody's commitment to degree completion. I would think that you would even drop back farther than 90 and look at people on a STEM track or on a teaching track or wherever we've identified our priorities to be. What is the most compelling need for us to have degrees completed? And we've really identified STEM and teaching certificates, especially in math
allied
and science.
health and nursing.
Okay, there's another one. Yeah.
The
I would
nursing one is a
suggest,
little trickier because you have to have been admitted to a nursing program, so that one gets a little.
I would suggest we send a list of these students in the fields in which degrees are offered to WGU Texas. I mean, that's precisely what
I'm not sure we can send those because we're sending them to the last institution in which they are
Oh, okay.
enrolled.
And Commissioner, you might recall we made a commitment to this consortium of institutions we're working with to sort of give them sort of the franchise for a short period of time to work with it, and we had talked to WGU about including them after we've given Midwestern and others some opportunity to work it out.
Any other questions or comments concerning agenda item
I had
7A?
two more.
Okay.
Robin, we talked a little earlier about Texas Pathways, and the chart
Yes.
says that we funded, it says 63 participants, $233,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but is that 63 school districts, 63?
No, we were counting the people that were on the alignment teams, so that's the college and the faculty that are actually participating actively in the teams. And they have science and math and social studies teams. I don't know what the other ones are, but there are a number of different teams that meet to talk about the alignment between the K through 12 and the higher education.
So this is
curriculum.
63 teams or 63 individual faculty?
Individual faculty.
Is that the total number participating?
There may be
Are there
more
other
that are
teachers that
coming
are
to
in the-
other, yeah, but we don't have any way of capturing that. They may come to events, or they may be contacted by the faculty that are on the teams, but we don't have any way of counting those. So these are just the active participants in the teams.
And I should add that while they share a name, each pathway is constructed a little bit differently. Also in terms of funding, for example, Bexar County, we essentially provided the memory, the storage for the computers. Houston, we contacted Houston Endowment and worked with Houston Community College to get a grant from there, and we're essentially only being funded for sort of the mechanical part. The grant goes through HCC. We provided, I think, $1.2 million to El Paso at one time, or some more significant amount of money. I don't recall. Now it's been a couple of years. So each of these is funded a little differently and structured a little bit differently depending on the local makeup of the school districts and colleges and universities in the area. So I don't know this. Is
And that
this
wouldn't
evaluation address all the pathways?
No,
or-
it doesn't. It
That's
wouldn't
was the
include
point
El
I was
Paso,
getting to.
for example, because that one's just getting off the ground.
So
Well, the reason I'm asking, obviously, because that was the idea of how we could most easily sample and find a test group to measure teacher effectiveness in college and career readiness.
Each of these teams
preparedness.
is doing other kinds of outreach, and we don't have the counts of the participants because we're a partner, but they're the ones who are really promoting this. So
Can those 63 participants provide us a count of the number of students and teachers participating in the pathways?
we can certainly find out.
I think we're in partnership with each of these pathways, and so it would be something we would sit down and negotiate with them. And the advantage is these are their own teachers, and they have access to that data, and it would be something that would really be handled at local level. The privacy issues would be resolved, but it would be somewhat different between pathways. So we just would have to find a way to do that.
One of the things that we have learned through prior evaluations of the Pathways model is that when we make sure that we include on the committees some of the curriculum specialists for the ISDs as part of those teams that are working together, that they are better able to implement some of the suggested changes. And so that's one of the things we have learned. And so it really depends on the individual team if we're able to get that curriculum specialist on there. And each school district may or may not. They may have different timelines on when to implement something. And so being able to get a count as to who's implemented something and who hasn't implemented and how many, because it's at the ISD level, we're not even sure if all the high schools, like San Antonio ISD is a huge ISD. We don't know if all of them implement it at the same time or not.
But everybody, but I'm sure you understand the sense of urgency that
Yes.
that's the main takeaway that hopefully you get in this area. Last question I had on this teacher effectiveness area is that there's a comment in the report about evaluators recommending that we widen the scope of the college career readiness faculty collaboratives.
Yes.
Can you describe, when you say widen the scope, give us some context on that?
Let's see if I can do that for you. This was done by an external evaluation team, and let me see.
I think, Robin, this had to do with the inclusion of the K-12 arena in the faculty
Yes,
collaborative.
it's primarily focused on college faculty and really on teacher education faculty. And they felt that there was some value in having more conversations with the K through 12 faculty, with the teacher education faculty, not eliminating the focus on teacher education faculty, but bringing in some other K through 12 faculty to engage in the conversation about how teacher education can be reformed.
So heretofore, we haven't had public school teachers participating in these?
I believe there have been some, but it hasn't been a systematic part of the program.
Because that was not the original focus, but we have done work with the college and career readiness standards and the K-12 arena. That was in another facet of our
The
work.
vertical teams
Yes.
were purposely
That is
structured
correct.
that way. So.
But we did have a lengthy discussion in my office the other day when we talked about this report because, and this is a comment the commissioners made before, that in our work out in the field, there are many small school systems where the resources may not be there, and maybe there is a way that we could connect with the regional service centers of the public school system to help them in terms of getting this word out and what we've learned with our collaboratives and the college and career readiness standards. They were a tremendous vehicle to us with the counselor training, because our staff is limited, and of course they have training components in each of their service centers. So there is a need to try and continue to expand this. TEA definitely has made a concerted effort. I mean, they've got lots of work out there with the college and career readiness standards because it is embedded in the TEACS curriculum. But as our partnership continues, that may be something that we may need to look at and as our work moves forward.
And I would just say that I think the team that was looking at this, one of the reasons that they said that was because they had observed some interaction and thought that was very positive. So it's not that they're saying that there's nothing going on, but that they think there's a real strength when K through 12 and higher education are communicating and aligning their efforts.
So the widening scope basically was to systemically, proactively include that
right,
same.
rather than having it happen by chance.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions by committee members? If not, at this time I'll entertain a motion to adopt the commissioner's recommendation. There's been a motion made. Do I hear a second? Motion made and second. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here today. Now I will continue with the agenda by returning to agenda item 3, update on Generation Texas campaign. Dr. Judy Laredo, Assistant Commissioner for P through 16 initiatives, will present this item. Judy.
Pardon me. This is a very brief update so you'll know where we are. We have been working rather feverishly, daily, weekly, and monthly with Generation Texas, which, you know, this time in our last year of work has two focuses, and that being statewide coordination and implementation at the local level. We have funded 9 regional P16 councils who have gone through training just very recently on how to implement Generation Texas within that community. Milkshake Media was selected again as the vendor in this final round. Budget was $1.8 million. We have monthly meetings with Generation Texas. The key 2 individual people who are connected with this work daily is Chris Alvarado and Veronica Trevino in external relations. The regional areas that we are covering of the state in implementing Generation Texas and the statewide campaign does include 6 out of the 10. And the proposed activities that will take place as part of Generation Texas is college and family nights, college and career fairs, career workshops, counselor advisor trainings, financial literacy nights. Milkshake Media has done a tremendous amount of work in developing CDs that provide this information, packets, what we call a toolkit, that'll be used by the regional areas in order to implement Generation Texas. One of the CDs, for example, is How to Pay for College. We went through the screening of them, the editing. It was a team of people who did this work. We have designated May 4th as Gentex Day across the state for our work, and then again on June the 12th, the P16 councils will be brought in to actually refine the actual day that they're going to be doing in their areas. So this work it's not slow, it's going very fast. We even have looked at all the work that we've done in the last couple of years and all the materials that were developed. We have found ways to be able to push that material out across the state at no cost to these other projects that were not funded. We have included the other projects that were not funded because many of them are still continuing their work. It did not end for them. But the meeting that we had for the P16 councils, we fund those that were funded to come in, but then we had people that still came in who were not funded. So the work has not stopped. But I just wanted to let you know where we are in that process to move this forward.
Any questions, comments?
A comment, a question. One, I had hoped to, in the update, but we can do this at another time. I'd like to see how the creative material and the Gentex tools continue to evolve. See some of the creative product, in other words.
That's no problem. In fact, isn't there some of this already on the website, Chris? It's on the Gentex website. You can actually see the videos and what has.
Can you download the CDs from the website?
I don't know. We can get you a copy. We can certainly provide you all with a copy of them.
And then, well, Chris is coming up here. I also had one suggestion. You said May 4th is going to be Gentex Day. Last year, and this is not my idea, it came from a friend in San Antonio, very involved with their chamber there. They suggested contacting all of the state colleges and universities and said, hey, send out an email to your alumni, because at least in some communities on Gentex Day, they wear their favorite
That is
college
correct.
T-shirt.
That's
And so, but you know, there were people in San Antonio who were like, what, you know, why are you wearing your college T-shirt to work? And so they had to explain it all. Well, if we kind of get this word out through the universities and colleges, I think you have a huge increase in the number of participants, particularly from year to year. So anyway,
HEB Corporation had all their employees wearing their college
yeah,
T-shirts
HEB was one
across
of the
the
big
state.
participants last year.
Yeah.
That's correct. All the information that Dr. Laredo referenced is currently on the gentex.org website. They actually added a new financial aid section when they developed the way to pay content. And the videos, the toolkit, the downloadable financial aid planning guide, all that is available for download and for viewing on the website currently. The other components that was referenced for the training in the summer for next year, and the Gentex Day materials will be also updated before I think that's before April 1, I want to say. We're reviewing that content right now. Actually, we just reviewed the brief for Gentex Day, and that should be going out shortly.
Can we get word out to the universities to and ask them to, you know, email, explain what Gentex Day is, and ask them to email their alumni? You know, every university obviously has an alumni association and can get the word out pretty easily for us.
Yeah, and I'd even do that with the chambers too, like you said. I mean, if we're sending an email, it doesn't take any more effort to copy on the Chamber of Commerce's and have them disseminate that information as well.
Yeah.
Correct, and that's one of the reasons why we
your
focus on
partnership
that.
with TAB is going to be very important, and they need to message to all these chambers, because this is an issue. I'm certain every chamber, I know my chamber deals with this every single meeting. This whole issue of where's my workforce, who's training my employees. I can't find people with these skills. And, you know, I was very happy when I first was exposed to this GenTX. I think we have not promoted this nearly enough to the general public, to the business community. Is the TEA going to send this out to every one of their institutions? I mean, it shouldn't just be alumni. It should be the entire business community of Texas, the entire education community of Texas. And what Fred's talking about is, wear your alumni colors to school. And the kids are going to go, well, I didn't know you went to Texas Women's. Tell me about Texas Women's University or, A&M. Those are the type of things, that can inspire the kids that, hey, this is something you can do.
We also have, in the past, in our work with the State P16 Council that does meet every 3 months under the leadership of Dr. Paredes, where our work this year is focusing on workforce areas with the 11 members that represent entities on this council. We have also been keeping them informed of where we are in our work, so that's another vehicle to be able to deliver this message.
Do we have a governor's proclamation declaring May 4th Gen TX Day?
Dominic Chavez in External Relations is working with the governor's office on.
I think it ought to be a big press conference here. It ought to feature the staff and all that we're doing. The one thing that I've asked in the past and would ask again on the Learn More, Earn More site, we have some very important areas or fields that we should definitely advertise, but this absolutely has to be greatly expanded. The technical fields are not included in here. I know we had Dr. Zook from Lamar Institute of Technology. They're crying for applicants to come and train because they've got immediate jobs available in this, a process operator in the petrochemical business. Those are degrees that do not require a bachelor's degree, and you can earn significant dollars. I would challenge us to greatly expand this to all areas of need, not just the ones you've identified. The ones you have there, primarily white collar, along with teaching, healthcare, nursing, very important, but we need to expand this to the entire spectrum of where our needs are.
One of what we're challenged with here is that so far we've fortunately had the College Access Challenge grants to help use federal matching dollars to fund Gen Techs to the scope we've grown it to so far. But the real long-term goal, and this is being done through the College for All Texas Foundation, is that we need to get the private sector engaged to the point that the private sector is willing to support this. And it's designed to be easily co-branded with companies like whether it's HEB or Walmart or whomever, because to sustain this as a 10, 20-year campaign is going to take private sector support.
Well, and I think you're going to see that because ExxonMobil is a major employer in the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. We were thinking about creating a website for our Chamber of Commerce independently just like this. For the type of unique jobs that are in that particular market. And I think you're going to find that type of sponsorship, but, sort of like we've built it, now we've got to go ahead and say, okay, what would you like to have on here that we don't have on here, and would you like to brand it with the your corporate logo on there as part of that?
Any other questions or comments? This is doesn't require, but go ahead.
Just from looking at the website on the Learn More, Earn More site, there's only actually, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 that you have in English and only 2 in Spanish. Is there a reason why the other ones aren't also in Spanish? Or
the Spanish video is actually longer than the English videos, and it covers a lot more of the general content. So obviously it was getting the actual student or participants to help facilitate that. So it was basically limited resources, and we decided to focus on the Spanish content on a longer video that really was more general, and it's actually broken up within the video itself. Okay. So it does have various topics covered within that general video.
Doesn't require a vote, just an information item only. If there's no more questions or comment, we'll move on to the next item. Item number 4, update on the implementation of end-of-course assessments and setting the college readiness performance measures on English 3 and Algebra 2. Lynette Hickman, Director of College Readiness, Division for P16 Initiatives, will introduce this item and the representatives and other representatives from TEA. Welcome, ladies. We're glad to have you here this morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm trying to get over a little bit of a cold here. Good morning, Chair Golden, members of the committee. I'm Lynette Heckman, Director of College Readiness Initiatives, and I'm pleased to introduce our colleagues from TEA, Dr. Chris Clute, who is the Associate Commissioner of Accountability and Assessment, and a substitute colleague because Gloria Ziskowski, who was supposed to be here, is also coming down with what everybody else has. So one of her staff members, Julie Guthrie, who is Director of Assessment for Mathematics and Science, is here to present information to you, give you an update on end of course, the new STAR end of course exams. As you look at the Blue Page information, you'll see that all of this work around end of course actually started after the 2007 legislative session. The work around post-secondary or college readiness didn't really start until after the 2009 legislative session. There was an element in House Bill 3 that connected the work that TEA is doing around the end-of-course exams with post-secondary readiness. And so we have become rather attached at the hip, which is a good thing. Commissioner Paredes and Commissioner Scott have been talking a lot about this work, and they are actually responsible for setting the measure of college readiness on the English 3 reading and writing. Those are actually two separate exams. And the Algebra 2 exam, the post-secondary readiness measure for that. So those two have been working and will continue to work on that. As a matter of fact, TEA and Pearson is has the contract with TEA on the assessments. TEA, staff from TEA, Pearson, and coordinating board staff will be presenting information to Commissioner Paredes on the post-secondary measures next week. So this is all happening fairly quickly now. We're getting ready to make those recommendations to Commissioner Paredes. Commissioner Scott has already received the information, and then the two of those gentlemen will then make that determination. But Dr. Clute and Ms. Guthrie are here to give you an update. Dr. Golden, I think you were the only one on the committee when in 2009 Dr. Clute and Ms. Ziskowski were here. So this is really an update, but for most of you it's new information. So I'm pleased to introduce my colleagues.
Thank you, Lynette. Dr. Golden, members of the committee, Chairman Paredes, thank you so much for having us today. I'd also like to simply thank Lynette Heckman and Judy Laredo. The staff at the coordinating board have been working with us from the very beginning in terms of the development of the program. And I think we'll have a much stronger assessment program, a much stronger set of standards, and much better prepared students in the future. What we plan to do is talk very briefly. You should have a handout of about, I think, 9 pages where Julie Guthrie is going to talk to you very briefly about the model that was used for developing the new assessment program, because that model is different from the model that we've used in the past for previous assessment programs. She is also going to talk about graduation requirements, because for the very first time we've linked different levels of performance on the high school assessments to different graduation plans. In the past, you simply had to meet one hurdle, and meeting that one hurdle qualified you for graduation under either the minimum, the recommended, or the distinguished plan, and that's no longer the case with legislation that authorized the new STAR program. She's going to talk very briefly about the performance labels and descriptions in terms of setting standards on those assessments and what they mean. And then I'm going to talk about the standard setting process as well, the 9 steps in that process, where we are in that process, when we anticipate that those standards will be announced, and the data that we have used to guide our decision-making process relative to the standards for those assessments. Julie?
Good morning. So the first document, let me turn on my microphone and that might help. The first document you have in front of you is the new assessment model. It talks about the design. From the beginning of the creation of the STAR program, we have been focused on academic readiness, and that's why we put readiness in the title of the program. The STAR program is the State of Texas Assessments of Academic readiness. And that's the goal of the program, is to make sure all of our students that come out of the K-12 system are academically ready for that next step, for post-secondary. And in doing that, we wanted to make sure that our program focuses on fewer skills and addresses those skills in a deeper manner. As Chris said, the STAR program has a different design than we've ever used before. With the TAKS model, we tested a set of the curriculum, the Texas Essential Knowledge of Skills, and every single piece of the curriculum was treated equally. With the STAR program, that's not necessarily the case. With the STAR program, we have identified readiness standards. Those readiness standards, and you can see that towards the bottom of that first page, are those that are essential for success in that course. They're important for preparedness for that next course. So if we're talking about 5th grade mathematics, they're important for 6th grade mathematics. If we're talking about English 1, they're important for English 2. They support the college and career readiness standards. They necessitate that in-depth instruction, something that educators would spend a couple days, maybe a couple weeks on. And they usually address those broad and deep ideas within the curriculum. Now, when we identified the readiness standards, we started at the top of the food chain, so to speak, when we're talking about the curriculum, with Algebra 2 and English 3. And we actually used the critical TEKS, the TEKS that were the student expectations that were identified to be critical, that our committees, the vertical teams, identified from the college and career readiness standards. So committees came together a while ago and identified critical pieces of those college and career readiness standards. And we took those pieces that were identified as critical and gave them to our advisory committees to help identify the readiness standards in Algebra 2 and English 3. And in most cases, those critical TEKS have a one-to-one correlation with the readiness standards, because all of the college and career readiness standards have been incorporated into the curriculum. And then we took those and informed from Algebra 2 down to Algebra 1, from Algebra 1 down to Grade 8, all the way down to Grade 3, so that throughout the curriculum, the readiness standards that have been identified support those critical college and career readiness standards. The other standards that are part of the assessment, but not necessarily the ones that we're focusing on, are called the supporting standards. If you flip to the page 2, you see some circle graphs, and again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The focus of the design of the STAR program has us focusing on a small subset of the curriculum. That 30% approximately across all the different grades and courses have been identified as readiness standards. So we're focusing on a smaller part of the curriculum, and we're taking that small part of the curriculum and making it a significantly large part of the assessment. And the assessment is the circle graph on the right. So we're taking that small 30% and we're making it 60 to 65% of the assessment. So we're focusing on fewer skills within the curriculum. Some other things that we are doing with the STAR program is including a greater number of items that have a higher cognitive complexity level. We are designing our items to align better with the cognitive complexity level that's written into our state curriculum. In reading, there's a greater emphasis on critical analysis. In writing, students are now required to write 2 essays instead of 1. In social studies, science, and mathematics, we're incorporating process skills, such as in mathematics, making a plan, carrying out that plan. We do that in almost all the math items that we work through. And we have a larger number of open-ended items on the mathematics and science assessments. So this document talks about the different design, the different approach that we've taken for the STAR assessment as compared to different assessments that we've done in the past. On page 3, as Chris talked about, the different graduation requirements. There are 3 graduation plans in the state of Texas: the minimum plan, the recommended plan, and the distinguished plan. And students are required to start at the recommended plan as a minimum, or the distinguished. For all students graduating, they are required to achieve a cumulative score. Now, the cumulative score is based on the 3 assessments that they take in a content area. So for the 12 end-of-course assessments, that cumulative score is based on the 3 assessments in a particular content area. For example, for mathematics, the cumulative score is based on Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. But in order for a student's score to count or contribute towards that cumulative score, they have to achieve at least a minimum score. Now, if you follow down on the chart, students on the minimum high school program, if they drop down to the minimum high school program, they might only be required to take and perform on 8 of the 12 end-of-course assessments, and those are based on the courses that are required on that minimum high school program. However, at the very bottom of page 3, it talks about the recommended high school program, again, the one that most students start on. Students on the recommended program are required to take all 12 end-of-course assessments: English 1, English 2, English 3, Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Biology, Chemistry, Physics, U.S. History, World History, and World Geography. Not only are they required to take all 12, but they have to meet that cumulative score in each of the 4 core content areas. They have to meet a cumulative score in mathematics, a cumulative score in English, a cumulative score in science, and a cumulative score in social studies to be eligible for a diploma. And then in addition to taking all 12, meeting the cumulative score, they also have to pass or achieve satisfactory performance on 2 specific assessments. That's Algebra 2 and English 3, in order to be eligible for a diploma on the recommended high school program. This is, of course, in addition to all of their curricular requirements. If you flip over to page 4, that's where you see the requirements for the Distinguished Achievement Program, the highest graduation program. Again, students must take all 12 assessments. They must meet that cumulative score requirement in mathematics, in science, in social studies, and in English. However, students on this program, the Distinguished Achievement Program, are required to meet that highest level of achievement in English 2 and English 3, that level 3 advanced academic achievement, which is also that post-secondary readiness component. So to graduate on the highest degree program, you have to achieve post-secondary readiness in English 3 and Algebra 2. The rest of that document talks about examples of what that cumulative score might look like. If you move on to page 5 talks about what those performance levels are going to be called and what they mean for the STAR program. TEA and the coordinating board put together an advisory committee back in fall 2010 to help identify and name the performance categories for the STAR program. Based on that committee's work, it was determined that there will be 2 cut scores, and that 2 cut scores will divide student performance into 3 categories. Those 3 categories are identified in the middle of that page: Level 3, Advanced Academic Performance; Level 2, Satisfactory Academic Performance, which means passing; and then Level 1, Unsatisfactory Academic Performance, that is failing. And then below, towards the bottom of the page, it gives a description of what those performance levels mean. And the text within each of those categories are relatively the same, but they've changed a little bit, and I'll highlight the pieces where they've changed. So for Level 3, Advanced Academic Performance, and this is the category that's known as the Post-Secondary Readiness Performance category for Algebra 2 and English 3. So this is the one that students will need to meet for the Distinguished program. Performance in this category indicates that students are well prepared for that next course. They demonstrate the ability to think critically, both in familiar and unfamiliar situations, and they have a high likelihood of success in that next course. In contrast, Level 2 Satisfactory Performance, which is the passing level, talks about students who are sufficiently prepared as opposed to well prepared. It says they're generally able to demonstrate the ability to think critically in familiar context, and it also says they have a reasonable likelihood of success in that next course. And then finally, for level 1, unsatisfactory academic performance, which again is failing, those students are inadequately prepared for that next course. And that should make sense. If they have failed the test, they're likely to fail the course and not be ready for that next step. They don't demonstrate sufficient understanding of the knowledge and skills, and they're unlikely to succeed in that next grade or course without sufficient, significant, ongoing academic intervention.
Chris? We are actually, I think one of the things we failed to say is we are administering the end-of-course assessments and the STAR 3 through 8 assessments for the first time this school year. In fact, next week we will be giving 3 of the end-of-course assessments, the English Language Arts 1, 2, 3 assessments, because we are allowed to give those assessments early where they have an open-ended component, in this case an essay component, so there is time to grade those assessments prior to the end of the school year. The remainder of the end-of-course assessments will be administered the second week in May. There's actually a provision in statute that does not allow us to administer end-of-course assessments before the first full week in May. And in fact, this year, the Tuesday is the 1st, which means that we'll be giving all those assessments the second week in May, which has created some challenges in terms of turnaround of hundreds and hundreds of test results prior to the end of the school year. If on page 7 you have the standard setting overview, and this is the process that we're in the midst of currently. We're actually between step 6 and step 7 currently. We started by, I would simply say that although I think you can always want better and better information when you're setting standards on a high-stakes program, we have more information and better information than we have ever had in contributing towards the standard-setting process. We began planning studies to inform the standard-setting process back in 2007. What that meant was that we could begin collecting data as early as 2009 so that we could actually follow cohorts of students through 2009, 10, and 11 in terms of test performance and be able to use that information to inform the standards. But we have a very strong research base to use currently in terms of informing the standard setting process that we have never had before. Julie mentioned developing performance labels and policy definitions. That was a committee that was jointly convened by TEA and THECB that came up with those definitions that she reviewed. That was followed by committees of educators, both secondary and higher education, that actually takes those definitions and they develop specific performance level descriptors for each course. So while you have a general performance descriptor for level 3, 2, and 1, then you have that same information informing Algebra 1, biology, world geography, for example. Then we convened, step 4 was convening policy committees to look at all of that research, which I'll talk about the specifics of that research in a moment. But we convened a policy committee, and their job was really to look at the research. And they were presented with a lot of information that, well, I will go over in a minute, but that was not only educators, secondary and higher education, but there was also legislative and business representation. And their job was to look at that data and recommend ranges in which to set level 2 satisfactory, ranges in which to set level 3. In your specific interest would be Algebra 2 and English 3. What's the appropriate ranges? Before the content committees even came in to look at that research and set those parameters for ranges within which those standards, or neighborhoods and within which those standards would be set. Then we brought in the content experts. And their job was to look specifically at the content and focus on the curriculum standards and recommend where those standards were set. The only restriction was those neighborhoods or ranges that the policy committee had recommended by looking at the research that was available. Then TEA met with the coordinating board once those recommendations were established by the committees, looked at them particularly in terms of the alignment. You certainly want to make sure that you have appropriate alignment between Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, for example. Appropriate alignment between English, 1, 2, 3. In terms of the standards being recommended, I think in the 30 standards that the committee recommended, staff recommended adjustments in only 5 of those, and those were because of curriculum content adjustments made on the basis of the content, and in most cases made on the basis of needed better alignment of those standards between Algebra 2 and Algebra 1, for example. We will be meeting with Commissioner Paredes on the 28th to review those recommendations for where to set the Level 3 standard for English 3 and Algebra 2. The plan is to then announce those standards probably in mid-April. And so those standards will be known prior to the students taking the majority of the end-of-course assessments, and those results will be reported against those standards. There is a requirement in statute, and I think it's a good one, which requires us to review the performance standards every 3 years. In terms of the information we have available in setting standards on page 8, we have a wealth of information. Empirical links between courses. I mentioned that because we were able to collect information starting in 2009, we have information tracking students' performance across courses for 2009, 2010, and 2011. We also had students, of course, who took both TAKS and the end-of-course assessment, so we know we can look at performance for those same students and map those onto the end-of-course assessments. Those are useful from another number of perspectives, but it also enables us to identify where the TAKS standards would have been relative to the standards that are being recommended for English 3 and Algebra 2. And I will simply say the final standards are, there's a significant gap between where the TAKS standards were set for passing and where the standards are being recommended for Level 2 on the end-of-course assessments. We have data about comparisons with course performance, where we literally collected grading information for the first time through the PEAMS data system, and we're able to look at performance of students on the end of course and the grades they received in the courses. I'll have to tell you, though, that is the data that was least helpful in standard setting and least helpful in terms of differentiating student performance. We have comparisons with SAT, ACT, comparisons with THEA and Accuplacer. We have the same students who took Algebra 2. We can see how they performed on ACT Math, SAT Math, THEA Math, Accuplacer Algebra. For English 3 Reading, we can see how those same students who performed on English 3 Reading performed on ACT Reading, SAT Critical Reading, THEA Reading, Accuplacer Reading. And for English 3 Writing, we have those same students, and we can see how they also performed on ACT English, SAT Writing, THEA Writing, Accuplacer Sentence Skills, and Accuplacer Written Essay. In addition to that, there was a lot of cooperation and work between coordinating board staff and TEA staff on the last study mentioned there, which is the college students taking STAR Algebra 2 and English 3, where literally we have had college students taking English 3 and Algebra 2 in beginning of their fall semester of 2011, and then we collected their course grades at the end of that first semester, so you could look at how students performed on Algebra 2 and English 3 and how they performed in their first mathematics or English language arts course in college. There's one other I didn't really mention, which is comparisons with NAEP and PISA. There we were limited in that we didn't have individual student level data. However, there's research out there that suggests that proficient performance on NAEP, our National Assessment of Educational Progress, is a measure of college readiness, and we were able to look at simply percent passing on those assessments for reading and mathematics compared to where we were recommending that the cut scores be set for the various end-of-course assessments. English 3 and Algebra 2 is the area where there is joint responsibility between the Commissioner of Education and the Commissioner of Education to sign off on Level 3, Advanced Academic Performance. And in the case of the end-of-course assessments, that's also the measure of post-secondary or career and college readiness. I will simply say that our standard setting committees set very high standards, in particular for Level 3 on English 3 and Algebra 2. In almost all cases, not only was the Level 3 standard higher, but the Level 2 standard in almost all cases, the Level 2, that's the satisfactory, that's not the career and college readiness Level 3. In almost all cases, that research showed us that performing at that standard required performance that exceeded performance on most standards currently used for TSI, or the Texas Success Initiative. That is, if you meet those passing standards, you can enroll in credit-bearing courses at a college or university and do not have to enroll in remedial courses. That included HERC, SAT, ACT, THEA, and AccuPlacer. So I would simply say, I think certainly the plan, certainly Commissioner Scott's plan at the agency is to phase in Level 2, that is the satisfactory level on the assessment. Our plan was not to phase in Level 3 on the assessments. The impact of not achieving Level 3 is graduation under the Distinguished Plan. For entrance to most colleges and universities, my understanding is that the requirement is graduating under the recommended high school plan, and my guess is we're going to have some discussions in our meeting with Commissioner Predis on the 28th about the possibility of phasing in the Level 3 standard, perhaps not for purposes of high school graduation, but perhaps for purposes of meeting the TSI standard, given currently the Level 2 standard appears to be that it's going to ultimately be the standard on STAR end-of-course assessment is actually higher than many of the TSI standards currently in use. That concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Fred.
One thing that would help clarify for purposes of discussion is two questions. First, someone who takes the recommended curriculum but performs well as a student can achieve a Level 3 score. They don't have to take the Distinguished to achieve a Level 3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then secondly, what level of detail will be on the high school transcript that colleges require for admissions? Is it going to just say the level, or is it going to give the disaggregated information about their individual and cumulative end-of-course exam scores?
I believe the plans are currently to simply specify the achievement level. Another possibility, I think, is is perhaps to put the scale score on there.
The scale score, which would be the cumulative?
No, the scale score would tell you, would give you more information than simply did you achieve level 2 or level 3. It would tell you how well you achieved level 2 or level 3.
So how will this work from a timing standpoint, since college admissions process all occurs in the first half to 2/3 of the senior year, and then if a senior doesn't meet, and before the last comments you made, I would have assumed that the point of level 3 was to indicate college readiness, and therefore universities would require a level 3 score for admission. But then you qualified that in a way that makes me question that.
Legislation, I'll simply tell you what legislation says and stop there. Legislation requires level 2 for the recommended high school program, not level 3. However, level
for high school
3,
graduation.
For graduating under recommended high school program, the requirement is level 2 on English 3 and Algebra 2. However, and then the requirement under the distinguished plan is level 3 on English 3 and Algebra 2. However, for purposes of enrolling in credit-bearing courses, the requirement under statute is level 3 on English 3 and Algebra 2.
Could I interject a question here? How would that affect dual credit courses and students that would normally and presently take in dual credit?
Well, for any course for which they receive dual credit, for which there is an end of course, they will be required to take that end of course assessment.
Before they can take a dual credit course?
No, but
is it prerequisite to college level work?
It depends on the requirements for the individual high schools in terms of their requirements for enrolling in dual credit courses. However, they will be required if they take a course that's going to substitute for English 2 or English 3 requirements for graduation from high school. They will be required to take that end of course. And unless the legislature changes the law, that'll also be required to be used for 15% of the student's grade in that course.
Amir?
I think I wanted to kind of touch on something that Chairman Heldenfeld said. By definition, if you're graduating under that distinguished program, you're saying that your standards meet or exceeds the post-secondary readiness. So you're saying this person is ready to go to college. This person is ready to take their education to the next level. Are we sending the right message to students by saying you have to graduate, you get this distinguishment which says that you're prepared, but in theory, you can graduate from a high school in Texas by a level 2 standard, which you didn't meet that level of saying you are post-secondarily prepared for English and math. That's kind of a tough line to draw when you say that. And what does that do?
Well, I think it's not whether you are or not prepared. It's how well prepared you are is the distinction there between level 2 and level 3. It's not a matter of you're prepared or not. It's how well prepared. Is it the difference between an 80% likelihood that if the student is motivated, all other factors being equal, that they're going to succeed in those courses versus a 65 or 70% probability? It's not this issue of are you prepared or are you not prepared?
So if you're post-secondary readiness performance, does that mean that you have an 80% likelihood of succeeding in college, or does that mean you have the ability to go through and make a C as a college student?
I'll look at something here when we.
Some of your
That's
data.
right here. That's
yeah.
right here. So let me give you an example on STAR Algebra 2. So where the recommended level 2 cut is being recommended to be set, that level 2 cut is higher than an ACT math score of 19, a TAKS grade 11 HERC standard of 2200, which is a THEA mathematics TSI score of 230, and a AccuPlacer algebra TSI cut of 63. It's also higher than an SAT mathematics score of 500. So the point I'm making is that it is truly different degrees of college readiness, because that's the Algebra 2 level 2 cut, which students would be, if students achieve that level, they're performing at a level indicating college readiness that's much higher than any of the tests we have been using to indicate college readiness. And then level 3 is way above that cut. So it's a matter of needing to transition from one definition of college readiness based on a series of assessments that TEA and the coordinating board have been using, which was the whole point, I think, of putting in the STAR assessment program, to transition to greater expectations and having more students being college ready and more students, in fact, being successful in college.
I think it's important to add one thing very quickly, if I could, that one thing Chris is having to deal with is that we are going to develop a new assessment for college readiness that aligns more directly with the college and career readiness standards. In fact, we're just having a review of the first pass of that next week. So Chris clearly made the point when she said current standards, because it's anticipated we only have one exam currently being used that comes close to meeting the college and career readiness standards, and
which is
THEA.
Yeah.
But
I thought that didn't I hear you say that the level 2 recommended level 2 cut scores were higher than the THEA?
Yeah, we look at THEA at 2 cut points. We looked at, for example, in Algebra 2, we looked at the THEA mathematics TSI score of 230, which I think is the minimum in coordinating board
State
rules.
Minimum, right.
And then institutions have the ability to set higher. And I'm told that a number used 270, and that's just slightly above the level 2 cut.
That's what the majority of institutions use, is this 270 cut score.
My point is, I think what Chris is saying is very important, that they're setting very high standards, and I'm just trying to emphasize for you guys that we still have yet to determine or develop what may be the new TSI exam. And Chris and none of us have access to what that is at this point. And so I just want you to be aware of that's unfortunately something Chris doesn't have access to right now. And one of the issues with institutions has been what Chris just pointed out, is some institutions have higher standards than others, and there's some discussion about whether that should be possible or not, and whether there should be a higher standard for everyone. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, because you will be hearing about this other assessment in future meetings.
What's the deadline on setting that single assessment, David?
It will be
Spring of next year.
Spring of next year, and so it wouldn't be implemented until the following fall, if then. But it's a very tight timeline. Chris has much more experience with developing standards like this than we do, but fortunately, we have actually gotten some good advice from TEA in terms of developing this new assessment as well.
May I just add one thing, just so that you have the context for who this is affecting and when they're going to be entering higher ed. These end-of-course assessments, for the most part, are affecting freshmen in high school. Now, there are exceptions to that. So most of those students won't be entering higher education, except for dual credit, but the majority of them won't be entering higher education until 2015. So there's a period of time, the TAKS test still is going to be applicable to many students, and so the higher ed readiness component, which is the HERC that she referred to, will continue to be the standard for many of those students coming out of high school for some period of time. So as we set our assessments on the TSI assessment that we're putting in place, all of this is going to roll out in a way that between 2013 and 2015, students will come into higher education under decidedly different expectations. The other piece of that is students don't have the benefit of the full curriculum in K through 12 under the new college and career readiness standards. So there's going to be some period of time, and as has always been true with K-12 assessments, students don't do so well in the beginning, but over time they do better and better. Performance continues to go up over time as they have the benefit of the curriculum.
Where are we in terms of where is the aligned curriculum at this point? How deep and broad has that gotten?
All of the new curriculum that has incorporated the college and career readiness standards has been adopted and has been implemented. The last one was this school year is when the social studies was implemented. So although, kids in like 8th grade last year had old social studies curriculum, kids this year have new social studies curriculum. So social studies was the last one to be in place, and it's in place this school year.
So from here on, then
That's
all
right.
high school grades will have the aligned curriculum.
Yes, sir.
Because obviously the biggest, or one of the biggest criticisms is that the test does not have on it what the curriculum taught them. There was an editorial in the paper just earlier this week, or last week rather, that made that exact point. And one of the questions that I've got is on your pie chart graphs.
Yes, sir.
As you differentiate it between readiness standards and supporting standards. If I understood this correctly, if the curriculum content, and I may have misunderstood these graphs, but it implied to me that 30% of the content is based on the readiness standards, but almost 2/3 of the assessment or testing is based on the standards. So isn't that going to make the K-12 system vulnerable to the same criticism that what's in the curriculum is not, what's on the test is not fully in the curriculum?
So let me see if I can address that a little bit more. The assessments are always aligned to the curriculum that's in place for that school year. And so we have educators that come in routinely to review and ensure that alignment. So we're always testing what teachers are teaching that school year. The circle graph specifically, the one on the left talks about the curriculum. And if we took all of the curriculum that's part of that circle graph, 100%, we're dividing it into two groups. Readiness is about 30% across the different grades and courses, and supporting is 70%. And then we take that group of curriculum standards and we move it into the assessment. We're still testing all of that. But the part that's the readiness becomes a much larger part of the test because we're focusing on those readiness standards, those that are most critical for success. And the supporting standards, which are important, should be taught and will be tested, but they are less emphasized on the assessment. So
The whole thing is assessed.
the whole thing is assessed, right? 100% is still assessed, but how we focus the assessment, we focus it on a small part of the curriculum, the part that's been identified as most critical.
Okay, so the curriculum content by volume divides out this way, but what you're saying then is each of the college and career readiness standards are covered by
Yes,
the
sir.
curriculum.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And for example, in Algebra 2, the college and career readiness standards that were identified as critical are the exact same ones that are the readiness standards. There's a one-to-one alignment between what was identified as critical in the CCRS and what is readiness in Algebra 2.
Okay.
Commissioner, you may remember Senator Shapiro and Representative Eisler, I think, were the two who had asked TEA and the coordinating board to identify the critical texts for assessment. And that's what the readiness standards have become. So we had teams of high school and college faculty sit down and go through the college and career readiness standards and the essential knowledge and skills and determine which ones should be the critical texts which have now become the readiness, the part of the curriculum that's now considered the readiness skills.
I have a couple of questions. I know you did as well.
Go ahead. May end up answering mine.
Obviously, you've done some field testing. What have the results shown? How are students doing on the field tests?
We actually have every test. We gave an operational version of every test except 3 in 2011. There are no standards on those assessments, so what you have to do is draw the line. 50% of the items correct, 60% of the items correct, 70% of the items correct, and then you can look at percent passing. But because we haven't set the passing standards on the test, I can't literally answer that question. I think we have some data. Julie, do you remember some of the numbers with 70% of the items correct? What it looked like for Algebra 2 and English 3? We can get that for you from the 2011 administration.
The second question, this is related to something Amir said. What do the terms mean? If you have a high likelihood of success in a college course, what does that mean? Can you convert that into percentages? Does it mean you have a 75% chance of passing a college course with a grade of C or above, or 80%? What does it mean?
Study set.
We're going to talk about that one.
Oh, okay. So here's your answer
To the previous question.
to the previous question. On Algebra 1, we had about 164. This is 2011. Let me look at Algebra 2. On Algebra 2, we had about
Do Algebra 2
74.
and English 3.
Algebra 2, we had about 74,000 students tested. There were 50 questions on the test. The mean raw score was 22. That's about 44% of the items correct. On
English 3.
yeah, I don't have English 3 because that was one of the ones that was a field test in 2011. On English 1 writing, about 128,000 students took. There was a total number of questions of 62, a mean raw score of 35, which is about 56% of the questions correct. English 1 reading, 33 out of 56 questions, a mean percent correct of 59%, about 127,000 students taking the test. I would just simply say that the commissioner is looking at either a 3 or a 4 year, likely a 4-year phase-in of the standards. We've looked at the distance between where students were performing and where the final standards were on TAKS and compared that to STAR, and the distance is much greater. And so we will be looking at probably, I think on STAR we had on TAKS we had a 3-year phase-in of the standards. On STAR we may be looking at a 4 or 5-year phase-in of those standards.
Final question. You said that you went to 2 essays instead of 1 on the writing test. Why'd you do that? I'm trying to understand the logic of 2 essays rather than 1, as opposed to 1 longer essay.
I think that 1 was based on the new design of the English curriculum. It was completely redone, so it's more genre-based. And so we wanted to get more coverage of the different genres that were part of the curriculum. And so we decided to and we know that writing is a huge piece of college readiness, a student's ability to write effectively.
I would argue, as a longtime English professor, I would argue that one of the things that students can't do well, typically coming out of high school, is sustain an argument. So that would argue for a longer single essay rather than 2 shorter ones.
Really good at initiating
That's one of the reasons. For example, you hear all the time, among college students, when they're asked to write a 7 to 10-page paper in a college class, they say, I've never written more than 2 pages before, and they have no idea of how to sustain an argument over the length of, as I said, 7 to 10 pages. That's a huge and common deficiency among college students.
Well, we had lots of advice on our test design for English 1, 2, 3, not only from high school educators, but also from college faculty. And ultimately, this was a decision about the design of that assessment.
I'll look forward to hearing the logic of that next week.
Maybe college professors are not wanting to read as much anymore either.
That may be true.
Yeah, I want to compliment you on what you've got here. I think it's very interesting. I want to encourage you to continue to set higher standards. I think we've had the soft bigotry of low expectations way too long in this country and in the state. The taxpayers are fed up with paying more and more and getting less and less. And as an employer, I would agree with the commissioner. I've got people who can't read and write. And writing and critical thinking is a skill that has got to be tested some way. Let me get to the correlation of your process in the standard setting. You talked about AL2 and setting the difference between a level 2, 3 at basically a 19 of the ACT and a 500 on the SAT. Did I get that right?
Actually, the ACT math is significantly below where that level 2 cut is, and the SAT math is just a small distance away from that level 2 cut.
Level 2, 3 is at what levels then?
Level 2 is satisfactory. Level 3 is the career college readiness.
But I'm saying to get a level 3, what do I have to score on the ACT in correlation with that? A level 3 student would be getting a 19 or higher on the ACT?
Yeah.
Is that what I was hearing?
No, I don't have that. I don't have that data.
Okay. Well, my question would be is have we gone and looked at the correlation with success at the higher education level with an ACT of 19 and an SAT of 500? I'm putting those at hypothetical because I thought I heard you read those two out as the AL2 distinguishing between whatever it is. Have we correlated that? And then I would challenge you on your process overview to also say which one of these standards here, of these 9 different review standards, correlates with success at the higher education level.
So the testing companies, the College Board and ACT have done that research, and they have identified those levels as college readiness levels.
Okay.
That's where those numbers came from. We didn't pull those numbers out of the hat.
Okay. And so what I would challenge you to do is possibly create a 4th level, which would be the College Readiness Achievement Program, which would substitute for your distinguished program and make a higher level than that for your distinguished program. To me, distinguished is not meeting the bare minimum standards of being prepared for college readiness. And you probably don't want to use that acronym, College Readiness Achievement Program. You may want to use a different acronym. But you've got to have, if for a user from the higher education perspective, we're looking at that and saying, we want you to identify who's ready to come directly into our colleges and universities and succeed. And you can have a higher standard than that that could be distinguished, but we want to know who's college ready. My other question would be on why was there an achievement program and the others are considered high school programs? Why are the acronyms all not the same? So isn't there a minimum achievement program, a recommended achievement program?
There's a minimum, there's a recommended, and there's a distinguished.
Right. Why do you call them high school programs and achievement programs when they're all on a standard that goes up and down? Why are the acronyms different? You've got HSPs and you've got APs.
What?
I believe that's the language in the legislation.
That's confusing. That will confuse people.
But it's not their fault.
No, if it's statutory, that's fine.
Statutory, yeah.
But if it's not,
It is. It's in the statute.
Why Well, we'll have to go back and recommend to clean that up. Why only English 3 and Algebra 2?
We actually, when we first started developing the program, we looked at all the research that was available in terms of correlating performance in high school to success in college, and currently there's not a lot of research, but the majority of research is in English language arts and mathematics. There's a little tiny bit of research on physics, actually. There is a requirement in statute that we look at the feasibility of establishing college readiness level on science and social studies assessments, and we will be doing that over the next 3 years.
So you may end up having some research that proves the validity of testing for those other items.
Yes.
But right now the science doesn't exist.
Or social studies.
The research.
But we have built plans in when we chose our current contractor for the assessment program. That was part of the RFP process, was to do that research to see the feasibility of drawing those parallels with college readiness on the assessments.
I'd like to make just one comment from the higher ed perspective, because all along this process, TEA and the coordinating board have worked together, and the college faculty have been involved in the item reviews of the assessments, in the standard setting. And when I talk to those faculty, they are overwhelmed about the rigor of what these new assessments are going to be assessing. They're very impressed with the level of expectation. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about how rigorous and where these standards are going to be set. It's a much different world, and the higher ed faculty, bar none, every one of them said this is completely different than anything they've ever witnessed, and so they were very pleased all throughout this process with what they were seeing.
And again, I want to compliment you and encourage you. You're on to something, and that's exactly where we need to go as a state.
I'd like to make a comment, if I could. Ultimately, obviously this is a work in progress, and we're probably in a way, on a large scale, conducting an experiment here in the state of Texas in terms of how we can assess college readiness, and we're going to learn as we go. I'm sure you will agree with me on that. Mm-hmm. Is there any evidence in other states? Has anyone else gone this way before? And can we learn from anything that has been done in other parts of the country, so we may not make some of those same mistakes if that's been done?
Now, my understanding is we are the leaders.
Well, that doesn't surprise me at all, and that's not a bad thing. But it certainly opens us up to some criticism, and certainly there's some pitfalls that we need to try to avoid if we can. And try though we may, I'm sure we're going to stump our toe along the way. And, we're open and subject to some poking and some criticism as we go. But
other
states I think it's important that we stay the course.
Have used end-of-course assessments, but I don't believe they've connected them to college readiness.
I don't think so. I was participating in the development of those Common Core standards when I was a trustee of the College Board, and I was on the Commission on Academic Standards and Performance Standards in California in the late 90s, and this goes way beyond anything that was done in those two efforts. So this is really ambitious. This is enormously important. I was just saying to Chairman Golden that getting this right, and particularly the college readiness thresholds right, is as important as anything that the coordinating board has done in the time that I've been commissioner. So we have to make sure we get it right. And we do commend you for your work, and I know that there's been a high level of cooperation between TEA and the coordinating board, and that's exactly what we need to make sure that the students of Texas are well prepared to go from high school to jobs or higher education and be successful.
I do think we have to be prepared to make adjustments to those standards, because the data that we have is the high school data is unmotivated. Those students, it was not high stakes. As the students move through the 12 course, end of course, and they actually, as juniors, take English 3 and Algebra 2, we will continue to collect data. And I think we all have to be open to making adjustments in those standards as we move forward, as the data improve.
I have another question, if I might. Obviously, there's going to be some students that don't meet these standards. What can we expect in terms of how we're going to prepare those individuals to be productive members of our society? I mean, what plan do we have? I mean, not 100% of our students are going to go to college or achieve a 4-year college degree.
Right.
And some of our obligation in our education, and as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, the majority of jobs that are being produced in this economy today don't require a 4-year degree.
Correct.
I think David alluded to that in some of the things that are going on in the petrochemical industry.
Some college.
Yeah,
Right.
some college, but not necessarily a 4-year degree.
Correct.
So a large percentage of those jobs that are being produced require some form of college training. Certainly, some of those students that don't meet this criteria or meet these standards could be plugged into that track. Is any work being done? Does any of this cover those students?
Well, there are two things that I'd share with you. First of all, in terms of students not making the measure, a lot of this is going to fall, obviously, on the school districts. And they have been, through House Bill 3, charged with the responsibility of providing instructions to students that don't meet the standards. So it's not just, okay, you didn't make the measure, you're on your own. So the high schools will have some responsibility to help remediate or accelerate students who don't meet the measure. The other piece of that is students who do come into our colleges and universities have a responsibility to those students who don't meet the measure of college readiness, but they are admitted to the institutions because it is not an admission standards. That those institutions accelerate or remediate those students through developmental ed. Now, the impact that this will have in the short term could be an increase in the need for students in terms of taking developmental ed. So the impact on our community colleges, especially in the short term, may be larger because they provide most of the developmental ed for those students, and that's where most of the workforce programs are offered, the very short-term kinds of things that you were talking about. So, and I think one of our responsibilities as a coordinating board is to inform our colleagues in our institutions of higher education what this impact's going to be, not only in terms of the short term, but how much better prepared those students are going to be, and what changes that may require in higher education. Because if you can imagine, if professors teaching English 1301 have been teaching students that they don't feel have been prepared, and now they are better prepared, they're going to have to change what they're doing. So the ramifications go all the way through higher education. It's not just K-12. So I do think we have to understand what's going to happen in the short term and what may happen with our colleges and universities for those students who we do have an obligation to or a responsibility to educate, and what we need to do to ensure that we do that in an appropriate way. I think a lot of the work that we're doing in ABE with TEA and the Texas Workforce Commission addresses some of that. A lot of what we're doing with developmental ed and the innovation that we're approaching with that. We're kind of approaching all of this at the same time. So will we have fits and starts, bumps along the way? Certainly. But I think we're better prepared to address some of those things than we've ever been.
When are the students actually tested in Algebra 2 and English 3?
The majority of students who are currently ninth graders won't take those assessments until spring 2015.
So you're talking about junior year?
Junior year.
So as 11th graders, is there a provision if they score at the level 2 level that they would be offered, obviously at the school district's option, remedial study, or a second option to take the test to be able to score at the level 3?
It's not an option. The school districts are required to provide remediation for any student who's not successful on the end of course assessments, and the student may retake the assessment for any reason.
So, but a level 2 is acceptable.
Right.
The student may retake the assessment for any reason. So if they score at level 2 and want to achieve level 3, they may retake the assessment. We offer the assessment 3 times a year, spring, summer, fall.
Again, that depends on the graduation
The
plan.
district is not required to give the level 2 achiever additional
There's my point.
education
Catch your point.
to achieve a level 3. Is that correct? The district's only required to do that if they fall below level 2.
I think it's level 2.
Yeah, that's what you're.
That's my point. But they're also not prohibited.
We'd have to check that to make sure that is that true?
Well, I mean, let's look at reality. If they're not required, they're not going to do it because they won't perceive they can afford it.
But if their graduates can't use that as a standard to gain a successful application to higher ed, if all of a sudden higher ed starts pivoting on this and saying, okay, now we've got a metric out there, we know who's ready, and level 2s aren't ready, we're not accepting level 2s, you got to go get some.
I get the impression that, at least in the first few years, that college admissions will still pivot more on SAT and ACT scores.
And not every student has ambition to go to higher ed.
There's a timing issue, too, because by the time they know they've got level 2 or level 3 attainment, they've probably already been accepted.
They're a junior.
So,
As a junior.
They're juniors.
these levels are determined at the end of the junior year?
Yes.
Okay.
So they have another year. I mean, they still have 2 years of math. Well, for most of them, 2 years of math. So they could be retested by the institution under our new TSI assessment if they didn't achieve it. Now, if they did achieve...
That would have served as sort of a safety net, although
Right.
it probably isn't going to help for selective admissions colleges, universities. I mean, they're going to say, you know, you're in or you're out, but based on end of junior year. Just because of the timing, they all make their decisions by February 1st.
But again, the end-of-course assessments, the outcomes of that are not used for admission purposes.
Well, that was the
Cannot be used
question.
for admissions purposes. As a matter of fact, in the TSI statute, it says that those assessments cannot be used for admission purposes.
But
They are used simply as to determine whether or not a student is eligible to take entry-level college credit courses, but they can still be admitted to the institution and be required to take developmental ed.
You're talking about the TSI assessment
Yes.
cannot be?
Cannot be used for admission purposes.
But a transcript that says you're level 3 or level 2 could be considered for admission purposes.
Not for admission purposes.
So they're still going to rely on SAT and ACT scores.
So you can't put that down as an award then, because that could be a precipitating factor that would say to a school this person was a distinguished scholar in high school.
Right. There's a difference between what's required for graduation from high school and what's required for admission into higher education. So under the uniform admissions policy, which is the higher ed, which controls the higher ed piece of that, students generally must graduate under the recommended high school curriculum. But there's nothing about performance on end of course relative to admission. It is relative to graduating under either the recommended or the distinguished.
And at the end of the day,
to get the diploma.
Right, but at the end of the day, what good is a diploma if it's not used as a factor weighted on that admissions criteria? If that's going to be if we're going to set aside a distinguishment, what good is that distinguishment if that's not going to carry over to the next level as a factor that would influence a decision made? Do you see what I'm saying? It's almost a moot point to make a distinguishment just to have a piece of paper that really isn't worth anything in the minds of...
Well, I think the one thing we can still say, Amir, and what we have been saying is that, although it'll depend on level of attainment, that earning a Texas high school degree once this is fully implemented will mean, at least if you're certainly if you're at level 3, maybe if you're at level 2,
Right.
that you're prepared to do college level work.
Absolutely, and I think, well, you're going to have to be at a level 2 level. It's what it's coming across as, is like that probably is going to be the standard that we're going to shift down to, if I was understanding correctly.
Yeah, I think the final point that I'd like to make is that we need to carefully consider phase-ins for the standards for this new system, because I think otherwise you come to the false conclusion that Texas students are becoming less college prepared when in fact they're better prepared than previous cohorts. There's also substantial financial impacts to students and parents if you're requiring students to take remediation courses instead of credit-bearing courses when they are much better prepared than the benchmarks we've used in the past, and yet can't accumulate credit towards graduation from college. So I think all of that has to be really carefully balanced, or I worry sometimes that I think we're putting in a better assessment program than we've ever had in the state of Texas in the public schools. I think that I think an end-of-course program has the potential to do more to improve instruction at the high school level than many, many other things we've done in the past, because we can clearly see how well a student is performing on Algebra 1, and we can see whether instruction has really been geared toward the curriculum requirements for Algebra 2 or biology or physics or chemistry, and we have a direct measure of that. But I think that unless we're very careful and very strategic in terms of how we move up those standards, I think that we could lose some of those policy connections between public education and higher education.
I'd like to go ahead and recognize David, and then we're going to go ahead and move on to another agenda item in just a moment. Go ahead, David.
I just want to put on the table, given what Chris said, that we are going through a transition with developmental ed. We're focused on accelerated instruction for those folks who may even need as little as a weekend to come up to date. We're also looking at paired courses so that students can actually get course credit while receiving some remediation simultaneously. So there are a number of things that we're working on that actually address the very points Chris was making.
And we're planning to fix that by next fall.
Yes.
Our pilots are addressing that right now as we speak.
So that we can scale it up next fall.
Yeah, we do have some preliminary information that says they are moving in that direction.
Committee, at this time, we're going to move on to another agenda item. There's no action required. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our friends from TEA for being here this morning, taking your time and helping us better understand the challenges that both of our agencies face in the near future. I want to reassure you and your friends from TEA that we stand ready and willing to do everything we can to implement this in such a way that greatly benefits our students. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Dr. Golden, if I could also state, Chris and Julie and Gloria and all the rest of the team that we've worked with, I know for myself in the past 4 years, and Lynette, who has been the lead on this, in addition to the work that Evan Hyatt did when she was with us, it has been a delight working with y'all. You really have opened the door, and it's not been difficult coming into that K-12 arena. So it is very impactful in what we're doing, because this is really, even in my long career, the first time that there has been such a relationship between the K-12 and the post-secondary arena, because before it was completely divided. And we just worried about getting out of high school, and post-secondary was not the issue. So thank you very much. It's been a delight working with you.
Again, I want to thank y'all for being here today, and I think we all can see where the students in Texas will benefit by our continued cooperation and collaboration. Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead, if we can. I understand I've been assured by staff that we can get through the rest of this agenda in the next 30 minutes. So that's what I'm going to try to do, if that's agreeable to the members of the committee. And then we'll break for lunch, and then we will not adjourn for lunch. We'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back in and then adjourn the meeting. At this time, I'll move on to agenda item 6. update on implementation of in-the-course assessments and setting of the college readiness. I'm sorry, never mind. I'll move on to the next page. Didn't turn the page. Item Agenda 5, update on information that could be provided to the independent school districts regarding student transition to post-secondary education. Susan Brown, Assistant Commissioner of Planning and Accountability, will present this item. Susan.
Yes, and thank you very much. I'm going to be very quick. As you have just heard, TEA obviously is doing quite a bit of review of college readiness and looking at the schools and what they're doing in the K-12. What this is going to provide to you is what can we provide back to the institutions, to the ISDs, on how their students are doing in post-secondary. This is planned. This was something that Dr. Golden asked for. We are planning to share it, and we will through TEA and with TEA to the ISDs to give them a high-level look at how their students, so that we give them information that an administrator or a board member would be able to use. So I'm going to go through this very quickly and then show you kind of a draft of what the overall might look like and get feedback from you. Go ahead. This first one is basically just the percentage of their students that go on to higher ed and how they compare to the statewide average. The other one is the type of how they're found. Are they in a public 4-year, a private 4-year, public 2-year, public in independent college, whether they're not trackable. These are students that we have don't have a valid SSN, so we don't have a way to track them. They don't give complete birth dates. They give out arranged birth dates. There's all sorts of reasons that they're not trackable. And then those that are not found in higher ed, they do have a valid SSN, they're just not found. And we say not found in higher ed, they're not found in Texas higher ed. We are not able to track them across to out of state. National Student Clearinghouse, when we've tried to get that data, and we've gotten it for a couple of years, it costs about $200,000 a year. So we don't have National Student Clearinghouse data at this time. And they have the growing.
$200,000 a year, though, we could track all Texas students out of state?
To those institutions that report to National Student Clearinghouse.
Which is what percentage of institutions?
It's quite a few of the institutions. For Texas, the biggest one that does not report is Oklahoma. OU does not report to it's not part of the National Student Clearinghouse. That's a big one. Yes. That one right there. They don't report. So and what we have found after we've gotten the data a couple of years, some institutions report their enrollments and some institutions report their degrees. They don't necessarily all report everything. And we only found that out because one of our staff members who does the tracking, her son went to an institution. She goes, I'm getting a bill and I'm getting report cards, but I'm not seeing him on here. And then when he graduated, she saw him. So that institution only reports their graduates.
But Susan, can we not use College Board and ACT data to help us with this issue? Because the College Board can provide us information on all the students who took the SAT in Texas who asked that their scores be sent to schools outside the state.
We do have it. Students usually will have a limit of up to 4 places without paying additional money that they will ask for their scores to be sent. So we can kind of get they sent them to 3 out-of-state institutions.
Yeah.
We don't know where they enrolled. We don't know if they actually did enroll, that sort of thing.
But it's important to
give an indication.
It's important for board members to know that the number of students, despite all the rumors we hear, the number of students who actually matriculate out of state is very low.
About 7%.
We've got
maybe on a statewide average, but for certain school districts, that's just not true.
Yeah, but as overall,
it is for individual.
Yeah.
Statewide, it's about 7%. Because we have had people that have actually paid for the National Student Clearinghouse data statewide a couple of times, and when we ran against that data, it came out to about 7% statewide. For those institutions or school districts that are right on the border, it will be higher. We're working with a group, trying to work with New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Louisiana to get a data sharing agreement, and actually all of the SREB states are working on a data sharing agreement given the new FERPA regulations that we would like to get worked out, that we would be able to at least track our students into those states. Most of those states do not have the independent data, the independent school data for their equivalent ICUTs.
Do individual school districts, or for that matter, individual high schools, track how many of their students enroll out of state?
They try to. Some of the bigger school districts that have more resources will use National Student Clearinghouse. They have a cheaper rate for individual school districts versus states.
School districts there are two types of school districts that have students go out of state. One would be in a school like you've mentioned that's directly on the border, and they may or may not do as good a job of tracking. If you talk about high schools like Highland Park, which have a large number, they know where their students are going. So the disadvantage, I think, would be for those schools on the border that don't have this large college-going rate to begin with. They're less likely to be tracking or have the resources to do it. One advantage is, in terms of what's being proposed, at least we would know that that portion might be very not trackable, might be much larger, or what wasn't found. And we could, if we wanted to, work with individual school districts to help fill out that number in terms of connecting them with the National Student Clearinghouse. It could be at some point we could see about negotiating a statewide contract for people who wanted to do that. It just hasn't been really economically feasible at this point, and the National Student Clearinghouse has not been perfect. The College Board we've used when we first did the top 10%. You can estimate some things, but you don't know if the student enrolled. You just know they sent their scores.
Right.
So it's going to continue to be a limitation, but I think if we do something like this, we need to make those statements. In fact, for a school that, say, is on a border, to include in the report that because they're on a border, there may be a disproportionate number of students that are untrackable because they're adjacent to Louisiana.
But that's the concern when almost 4 out of 10 students are not found or not trackable, and we publish this data, make it available to school districts, but also the public. You've got to be able to put it into context. In the school district, whether they're on the border or because it's an affluent single high school district, needs to be able to say, well, in our district, 3 out of every 10 students enroll out of state, to put this in context.
Right.
I'd like to interject here. There's obviously an opportunity here. You have school districts within the state who are paying their dollars to get this data, apparently from the clearinghouse.
Right.
But the data is suspect. So why are we paying, or why would we pay for suspect data? It would seem to me that our opportunity is to go to the clearinghouse and say, if you do a better job, we'll initiate a statewide contract and make it available to all of our schools.
National Student Clearinghouse has done they have improved. At one point, when we first started talking about and people brought up to use the National Student Clearinghouse, only about 30 to 40% of the higher ed institutions nationally were actually included. Mm-hmm. I think that is up to about 80%. So they are continuing to work on it. In fact, UT Austin just joined the National Student Clearinghouse, which we didn't really worry about because we already had their data. But for other states, factors, about 2 years ago, maybe not even that long ago. So they're still working on trying to get OU and some of these other institutions on board. But at this point,
So the 200,000 would not allow us to have the data and share it with all of our high schools?
No.
It would not?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. That's to be able to use the data for any type of research, not share it across.
But the whole point to research is to inform our school districts of what they just did.
Yes.
Well, in other words, we could add it to the aggregate data.
We could add it to the aggregate, but we would not be able to say, okay, these are your individual students that went to these colleges.
What we could do is at some point, if we went this route, would be to estimate if a school district was on a border, how much that might, on average, increase college going rate, at least for institutions like that. We couldn't say for the individual institution, but we could say all our border institutions that we've found, about 15% go to an institution, say New Mexico State or University of Louisiana, Monroe, Shreveport, something like that. But we couldn't say specifically make the match directly with the school district. That would be the research.
This shows that the percentage of their students that are meeting the TSI standards in either reading, writing, math, or in all areas. So this is information. And this next one shows how they do compared to the state for the students who earn a degree 6 years later, whether it's a certificate, associate degree, bachelor's degree, and how they do from this individual.
And again, that's only Texas data, right?
Right.
So probably need to put the word Texas in there.
Correct. And go to the next slide. This has a little bit more explanation. This would be what we would propose to send out, and we can make, we have Texas on 2 of them. What we could send out, and we have just a little bit of a discussion about what's here, that sort of thing. And this is what's in your blue page.
I think this is excellent, and I think I was one of the ones that wanted, along with Dennis, to give feedback to the trustees and the taxpayers and the parents of these school districts. I would like us to keep looking for a solution to the pipe that says not found, so that we could say out of state. Obviously staff's already looked at it. I would not support spending $200,000 for 80% of the data. But at the same time, I could see superintendents saying, well, 34% of our people went to Harvard, so that's why we're at 35%.
Oh, I guarantee you that that is what you'll hear. In some cases, it'll be accurate. Others, maybe not so much. But what are we doing to bounce this off of school districts and superintendents to say, will this be useful to you?
All of this is individual data that is actually out on our website. It just hasn't been put together like this. And so what we will be doing is sharing this with TEA, maybe share it with some of the school districts to get their feedback on how it would be most useful. My recommendation would be that we then have a joint letter from the commissioner and from the Commissioner Scott at TEA to send it out to them that way, so that we don't want anybody at TEA to be surprised when they see it like this, obviously.
Send it with a copy of their individual district?
Yes, for their individual district.
And maybe at some point to put the data in the almanac.
I would,
Mr. Chairman?
let me make a
It would
quick
be far
comment.
too much, Commissioner.
With 1,200 school districts.
The almanac would be this thick if you included all of this.
But, the plan is to put it on the website, reference it. We could reference it in the almanac that here, or put the statewide numbers in the almanac and then put for your individual school district, here's with the link.
We could have a separate publication. Remember, we have more than 1,000 school districts. So to do this, it would take at least half a page, but to really be readable, a full page for each school district. So that would be a rather massive publication.
Let me make a quick point here, and then I'm going to recognize David. My idea in terms of what this could do for us won't occur unless we can communicate this to the people that can really make things happen. And in my mind, that's a lot of the school trustees. There's so much of this information that if we send directly to superintendents, will not get into the hands of some of the decision makers. And I've called that the filter that often exists within our systems. And I'm not necessarily being critical, I'm just telling you that's the way it is. And this information needs to be in the hands of Board of Trustees where they can look at the information and then compare their district to other districts across the state and see how their students and how their institution is performing relative to the other districts across the state. Now, I'd venture to say that if you ask them how their football team is doing as compared to the rest of the schools across the state, they can tell you that. But whether they can tell you this information, the trustees most likely cannot. And I think this is equally as important, if not more important, than football, even though I love football. David?
Yeah, I think that I would like to see us move forward sort of in a pilot program working with TEA on this design with the suggestions we've had, and then convene some type of a stakeholder process of maybe some school districts that they can sample to look at the data. And then with the ultimate goal is to post one of these for each school or school district, whatever's appropriate, on the website, and then do as Dennis said, put it out to the media, put it out to the taxpayers, put it out to the trustees and the superintendents as well, because I think it will surprise us. I mean, we've already put the raw data onto our website. It's already there. I didn't know it was there. And I think that there's a lot of people in secondary education in somewhat denial that it exists, and maybe they don't really want the public to see it. And I think the light of day would be very helpful.
And I will say TEA also has some of this data on that they linked from their website to ours, and it's part of their AEIS accountability system. And
Yeah,
so
Putting data on a website's like pouring a little bit of water into a big drinking trough. You know.
they also include, there is a report that the ISDs have to provide, and I don't know if it goes to their superintendents or just back to TEA, that requires them to come and get the TSI information by area off of our website, because when we get delayed in getting that out there, we get a lot of phone calls. So I do know that there are some people at the schools that look at it, because at least that one part of it.
I do think, though,
They do call.
the importance of this exercise is one thing we've learned over time is less is more frequently. Our website has so much information that, and what we tried to do here was to squeeze it down to those things that might actually cause them to ask other questions and look at the other data.
Yeah.
And because it's succinct, it's pointed, and I think if you were on a school board, you would want to know, well, why is this? Why? And then ask other questions, which both the coordinating board and TEA could answer with some of the data already on the website. So I do agree that having something on the website doesn't mean people are going to look at it.
No, you're exactly right about, boiling this down and less is more. And just the next step is we need to, you can't expect them to come get it. You've got to get it to them.
Yes, no, and that is the plan, is to send it out. TEA, I know, does some, the commissioner puts out information that all of the superintendents and probably the school boards, and we can work with TASB and the School Board Association to get this out to the school boards at the same time.
This information, in my opinion, if it's filtered through superintendents, the good information will naturally get to the board members. That information that doesn't reflect positively on the district will be trashed, most likely. So I want to make sure that the decision makers in the rooms, now maybe I shouldn't have said that, but in all likelihood, I know that's happened in the past. But we need to make sure this gets in the hands, or at least this type of information gets in the hands of decision makers at the board level, so they can make informed decisions and know where their district is at.
Right.
I think this is great for the school districts, and I know that this would be an unbelievable undertaking, but it's good for a school district to be able to see how they compare to the rest of the state. Would it be possible to do this for every high school so that they could say, how do I stack up not only to the state, but what is the school in that school district that might be a low-performing school, and how do we hit those schools, and how do we get them up to par with everyone else?
Some of the data we can put out by individual school. It depends on the size of the school. You get into FERPA issues if you have a very small school. That's why you see a lot of percentages and maybe not so many totals. And is we're trying to provide as much information as possible. And so there are some school districts, obviously, that have huge schools. And so you can put a lot of information out for those individual schools. It's when you get into the really small school districts that you start running into the FERPA problems, and we don't.
Among the more than 1,000 ISDs in the state, 500 of those are considered the small rural schools, and some of those schools may only have 100 students. So you have the grade level, so it's not as distinct. When you get into a Houston ISD, you have many high schools. In this case, you may just have one school, or it may be a combination thereof. So that's why the issue
Right,
then.
What about starting with at least just rolling it out with maybe just detailed school by school with the 5A schools in the state and seeing how that responds, if it changes any programs or development in the school districts, and then kind of bumping it down to what the appropriate levels would be, obviously, for schools that have FERPA limitations.
And we're actually already working on something different from this with the 8 large school districts. It was funded through a Gates grant, and we're working on pulling together some of that type of information to show, and we're focusing on the 8 large school districts because that's where you can drill down to the high schools. And so that will inform a little bit more of what we can do with this as we move forward.
Could I, unless there's any other questions or comments, I think, Susan, y'all have done a great job up to this point.
And
could we allow the staff, if it's agreeable to the committee, to continually work on this project and then maybe bring it back in a recommended form, maybe at the next board meeting?
Okay.
I'd like to make one comment with regard to large districts and small districts, and this is on a personal level. My wife and I are actually thinking about, or at least encouraging our daughter to move our granddaughter from a large district to a small district because of our concerns about the quality of education that's being offered in a small district as compared to a larger district. So I understand what you're saying, Amir, but my real goal in my mind is to help parents identify what school districts are getting what outcomes, so parents can make a better informed decision as to where they want to live or may want to raise their families. Young families can oftentimes look at this information. I know that I've entertained an opportunity to hire a young doctor to join my practice, and one of the things that they look at is the quality of the schools. And unfortunately, I haven't had a whole lot of luck getting an associate into my practice, but our schools are improving. Having said that, we're seeing some encouraging signs in our district in terms of the success that some of the students are achieving now as compared to even 5 years ago. So the basic importance of this information, I think, filters down to the parental level and helping our taxpayers and students and parents understand what districts are performing. And I think we can even take it a step further in helping those other districts that are not performing begin to look at those districts that are, and maybe adopting some best practices, identifying some districts that are doing some things real well, and learning from those districts. And with this information, and oftentimes can point out that for us.
And actually, TEA has a annual or biennial conference where they actually share best practices. It's based on assessments and that sort of thing. And so I do know TEA does some of that.
You know, one thing too, and this may not be quite what it needs to be, but, you know, I see a lot of things in my area of the state. And of course, Texas is notorious for loving guns and shooting things with them, like birds and deer, and football. And
shooting football?
No, not shooting football, but playing football, you know, as in winning football games. Shooting deer and birds and then playing football. But, you know, what this does is, I think, at least focuses on some importance on some other issues that are not necessarily bad things, but, you know, when we start putting this in a form that people can see it, then I think we begin to focus more emphasis and importance on things that ultimately may be equal as important as football anyway, and shooting deer. Anyway, let's move on to the next agenda item if we can, if no other comment or questions. This is for information purposes only. Susan, y'all are doing a good job. Why don't we do this, continue to work on that. Let's plan on bringing it back to the next committee meeting if we could. Agenda item 6, I said would be through in 30 minutes. I don't think I'm going to quite make it. Considering adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to the guidelines of the 2012 Texas Higher Education STAR Awards. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Mary Smith, who I think, did the best job I've ever seen at the banquet last year, and I told her that, and I've been to, I think, almost every one of them over the last 4 or 5 years. They've all been good, but last year's was truly outstanding. I enjoyed it. Mary, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Golden. Members of the committee, I just for purposes of your time, I think I'll just go ahead and just cover the changes, if you're all right with that, from last year's Star Awards. Just a quick update. We provided 6 awards last year, and they were presented at our 2011 Texas Higher Education Leadership Conference. Wanted to just call your attention on your blue page, and actually it's pretty much reiterated on your guidelines there. For 2012, we are recommending that we just return to the retaining the categories that have to do with the closing the gaps, rather than the 2 new categories which had to do with cost efficiencies and teaching excellence. So as you'll see, the guidelines are recommending retaining only those categories that are to do with participation, success, excellence, and research, our closing the gaps goals. And the next thing that we are recommending is that we are wanting to increase from 2 to 3 years the length of time for a program, project, activity group, or organization to have been in operation. The Internal Review Committee has been concerned about the very new data that have been coming out from some of these more recent programs, so we're just recommending a change to that. And then finally, we are recommending that we actually eliminate the category for individual persons, because it's very difficult to compare individual persons' contributions and multiple persons' contribution to a project or activity. And instead, we're going to recommend at a later time developing an award specifically for individuals that would be identified by the commissioner and our board's recommendation. So the categories that we're recommending, as you'll see there, 1, 2, and 3, is just the programs, projects, and activities at our Texas institutions of higher education, groups and organizations in Texas, such as those that do promote a college-going culture, and then finally partnerships. And I did want to make a quick note, as you'll see, that the groups and organizations in Texas no longer includes the independent school districts this time. We're recommending that we include them only in partnership with the higher education institutions and businesses and communities. So those are the big changes that we're recommending at this point. I won't bore you with going through all of these pages. Essentially, the actual guidelines are a reiteration of your blue page. So I'm going to move you quickly to page 4 of your guidelines there. As you'll see, there's the timeline, which is a summary essentially of the 4 pages that are in your white pages there. The timeline reflects a 1-month earlier award ceremony, primarily because of some issues that we had with getting some hotel space at the state rate. So as you'll see there, instead of it being November, the final Star Awards presentation will be in October, which essentially backs everything up. So the May 7th date would be the call for our Star Awards nominations, June 1st would be the nomination deadline, and July the 6th would be the application deadline, and then we would notify the finalists in early September. And then we have our Star Awards ceremony is scheduled for October the 4th as part of our Texas Higher Education Leadership Conference for 2012 at the Doubletree Hotel right over here on I-35 and close to 183. And with that, I'll end, and I'll be delighted to answer any questions you might have about these guidelines.
Members, David?
I don't disagree with your timeline of lengthening it to 3 years, but are we going to have a shortfall or a gap this year because we won't have enough in the pipeline, or do you have plenty? You believe that there's going to be plenty of applicants for the programs?
I think there will be I think there will be plenty of applicants. We're trying to encourage more participation, so I really don't think that's going to be a problem. I think it might be a problem if we would have increased it to 5 years, which was another one of the options that we considered, but.
So, but the committee could also recognize if there's 2 of equal weighting, that the one with the 5-year track record might get it this year and still have preserved the opportunity for the one with the 3 to come back the next year as a 4.
That's true.
Yeah. I move approval.
Motion's been made second. Is there any other information at this point?
Yeah, a question. The one recommendation that I do have concerns with is, after only 1 year, eliminating awards based on cost efficiency and teaching excellence, because those are important emphasis for us.
The problem that we had was that we had specifically 78 applicants for the traditional Star Award, Closing the Gaps. And for the teaching excellence, we had 6 applicants, and for the cost efficiency, we had 4 applicants. So the concern was the competition so that an individual in one category, the categories were so different that we had problems with that, which is...
Well, two thoughts. One is it was the first year. I don't know how well aware
that was an issue.
The stakeholders were of those new categories and whether, whether we know why it was so low or there's something we could do about it. Secondly, another option would be to treat cost efficiency and or teaching excellence as criteria within some of the other categories.
We do pretty much, one of the categories, one of the criteria, I should say, that we use to evaluate the proposals is the cost efficiency within. So, for example, the cost per student needs to really be a big part of their application, because obviously if a program cost $1 million and they only serve maybe 20 students, then that may not be the most cost efficient. We wouldn't be able to replicate it. So that was one of the issues that we had. Yes, sir.
Mary, I think that's a good idea. I think we could make the cost efficiency, emphasize it more than we currently do in the guidelines for the evaluation.
Fine.
I wanted to add one thing to the teaching is, I had personally wanted to add the teaching, and as we went forward, I began to worry that one of our issues in identifying individuals is there really are, every school has teaching awards. There are many organizations with teaching awards, and most of them have money attached.
Right.
And I and I frankly think that, well, we could have advertised better, but at the same level, I'm not sure that we will have the number of quality applicants rise to the top that we would like to see. So we wondered about that, but I just wanted to mention that was one concern, that we thought we might be actually redundant in that area.
And we were trying to be careful because with the two new categories, we didn't allow self-nominations, whereas with the traditional STAR Award, for the Closing the Gap STAR Award, we do allow self-nominations. But particularly with respect to teaching excellence, we felt it would be inappropriate for somebody to happily nominate themselves when in reality somebody else might have gotten a major award from their president. So we were careful there. But actually, I like the idea of including the more emphasizing the cost efficiency of the program more, because part of this is to be able to replicate it. And as you saw at our last conference, when we had the Reinventing Instruction and Learning Conference, a lot of the STAR Award finalists and winners that specifically had to do with student success were demonstrating their programs as part of the Reinventing Instruction and Learning Conference. So we could include this more.
Well, I would like to see us either do that, or if we didn't allow self-nomination, I can understand the thought behind the teaching excellence, but I don't see any problem in allowing self-nomination were we to continue to have a cost efficiency category. So I think there's two. You could talk about that and decide which of those two options makes the most sense for this year.
And then we'll take it back to the board in April?
That would be...
That's fine.
agreeable, I think.
Yeah.
Fine.
Sure.
Does anyone else have any? I want to make one other point. This is something that was brought to my attention a week or two ago, and I think this speaks highly of our award, STAR Award, and I think in terms of how it's beginning to be recognized by different stakeholders across the state. The Greater Houston Partnership, I think this will be the first time they've done that. We'll do that this year. I'm not aware they've ever done this before, but I was notified that they're going to actually recognize the two Houston area schools that received a STAR Award at the Greater Houston Partnership banquet.
They did that yesterday.
They did,
yes,
and
sir.
I think
yes,
a former member, Laurie Brecker, made that award on our behalf. So I think that speaks well in terms of how our stakeholders are beginning to recognize and embrace what we're doing here in the area of the STAR Awards, and I think that speaks well of how far we've come.
Actually, I'm quite pleased because I've seen websites. They actually advertise their program. If you pull up their website and they say that this won a Texas Higher Education STAR Award, and they use that as an advertising thing for themselves on there, and they put press releases and everything. So I'm actually quite pleased about it myself.
Well, I think it brings a certain amount of prestige to our agency too when they recognize This is an award that's presented by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, so I was pleased to see that. I want to bring that to the attention of the rest of the board members. Is there anything else? If not, we've got a motion to approve. Any and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There is none. Motion passes. We are moving to item agenda 7, matter of relating. Thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Matter relating to the Committee on Closing the Gaps. Agenda item 7A was considered earlier in the meeting. We'll move to agenda item 7B, consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to extending the developmental education project contract with Texas State University, San Marcos, and providing additional funds. Dr. Judy Laredo, Assistant Commissioner, will present this item.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, you previously had approved a grant to Texas State for $400,000 to begin our work with the fundamentals of concept, understanding, and focus, the math program, which is also part of our CCA grant. What we have found already over the last couple of years, because prior to that, Texas State had implemented this paired course model with students that are barely on that line of not being college ready and being able to take that math credit-bearing course. What we have found is that students coming through this concept are demonstrating 85% success in completing that course and also getting college credit. Because of some funds we have available, we want to extend this because our demo sites, our DevEd demo sites, plus the colleges that are in the CCA component are part of it. We want to extend this to other institutions, not only for them to be able to offer it, but to be part of that training package so that they can learn how to implement it, which could mean we could tap as many as 50 more institutions across programs across the state. The other thing, too, that we want to be able to do, this extends our evaluation information, but at the same time, we want to host a symposium later on related to this course as being a paired course and the success that it's had in helping students matriculate out of developmental ed with that credit being attached to their course. This is part of our mandate under House Bill 1244, which and House Bill 3468, which governs us as the work we are doing in developmental education. So I'd like to add an additional $90,000 to what we already have awarded Texas State. The $90,000 exceeded the 10% cut on that $400,000, so I had to come back to the committee for approval. But it's also based on evaluation results we're seeing. We're seeing success, and we want to be able to extend this so that other institutions have the training and the opportunity to implement it to their students.
Motion's been made. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, any additional comments or questions at this point?
I have one question.
Okay.
Judy, are we staying in touch with Uri Treisman and
Yes.
the people that are working on StatWays? Because for the information of board members, there's a movement nationally that suggests that college algebra shouldn't be the only gateway to mathematics readiness in college, that statistics is probably a more useful course for the bulk of students. And as this movement gains momentum, we ought to make sure that we're in touch with them and that we can incorporate that concept of math readiness into our work.
We have been in dialogue with Dr. Treisman, and in fact, Dr. Treisman has been watching this very closely in that process. So.
To further just add another point to exactly what you said, in medical school admissions process now, statistics is a required course for mathematics, and calculus is not required anymore. That change occurred this year. So that
and we're finding that in other degree plans too. College algebra is not the course that is required.
I just want to make sure we're not putting all our eggs in the algebra basket.
No, but what we're finding though is that when you take a student who is marginally below that line, who's got some skill, and you pair it, the support course, with the actual credit-bearing course, students are having success. And so that's, I think, what's important. And if that be the case with other courses like statistics, pairing them too, which is also part of that CCA concept, then this is a real answer to help students not get demoralized and say, I'm in remedial ed, I'm not getting getting anything out of this, any credit out of this, where they are getting credit. What they also have found that's interestingly enough, in the last 2 years at Texas State, there are students who came into this program taking the paired course who ultimately became a math major. And that really, that would not have happened to me. But to be able to come in with a deficiency and then ultimately say, hey, this isn't so bad. I've learned something. I understand this. And then make the movement to wanting to declare this as your major is absolutely really, it's very impressive and exciting. So that's why we want to keep our work going on in this area.
Yuri Treisman is also one of the team of advisors we have for our college readiness. Our developmental education pilots. Also, I should note, you do have to at least be somewhat competent in ninth grade algebra to get beyond the first statistics course.
Yeah, I remember statistics being a lot harder than algebra, too. So,
Judy, I have a question. You mentioned that they're partnering with 15 community colleges. Is that right?
Yeah, we have community colleges involved in our DevEd work, our demo sites, and because of that's where developmental education
right. And then
is.
this spring, you said in March they have 349 students in 7 institutes. Those are all junior colleges then, in the San Antonio, San Marcos.
No, it's the schools that we have funded under the CCA, and I have that. I know that's somewhere. Where did I read it?
They're not just in the San Marcos.
They're not just in the San Marcos
they're kind of
area.
scattered all over the state.
Yes.
Then.
Yes.
Thank you.
so it says 7 institutions successfully launched the model on their respective campuses during 2012 spring, serving
And
a total of
that's
349.
our CCA. But our demo sites, our DevEd demo sites, are also part of this process.
And that would
We've got
be
those in
additional
El Paso.
to.
We've got those in the Houston area. We've got it in San Antonio.
And this is related to the point I made when Chris Clute was here, is that we do have, efforts underway to make sure that students that are close can get college credit while getting developmental help. And this is specifically focusing on mathematics in an important kind of way.
This partnership with Texas State San Marcos makes a lot of sense. Texas State is the only university, as you'll recall, that offers a doctoral program in developmental education. So this work will inform the way they train students in their programs. So it's a really good partnership.
The professor who is leading this effort, Selena Vasquez, is also the lead professor who worked on the college and career readiness standards in mathematics. She guided that process with her co-chair. So what work she has done, she's very in tune what college and career readiness means, especially in mathematics.
We have a motion and a second. Chair calls it for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Judy. Agenda item 7C. I think this is the last one. Yeah, and it should conclude our meeting. We will not adjourn. We'll recess for a few minutes. Consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to committee relating to amendments to this work-study mentorship program contracts for the reallocation of funding. Dr. Judy Laredo will now make this presentation. Judy.
Every 3 months I have come back to you because this money was awarded at the beginning of the fiscal year. It's over a 2-year period, but we are constantly monitoring the grants every 3 months to ensure that they are utilizing those funds, students are accessing those funds. And so if you notice on the back of your blue page, there are a few institutions that would like to decrease that funding amount, and there are other institutions that are asking for that money. So in order to amend their grants, because their grant award, because of the size, I am coming back to you to ask permission to amend the grants to the amounts as indicated, and to increase in those 2 categories, to those 2 institutions, the funds that they're asking for. So the total amount that will either be decreased and channeled out is $90,000. We will continue to do this into the next fiscal year because it's a 2-year funding cycle. And this way, it helps us keep on track of the funds.
So these changes would be based on what they projected enrollment to be and what reality enrollment became? So,
That's right.
okay.
And
Any
it's
other-
also because others may be increasing and need more help. We're not waiting till the end of this fiscal year to say, well, you had this much left on the table when it could have been given to someone else.
I'll make a motion for approval as requested.
Motion's been made second. All indicate favor by saying aye. Any opposed, like sign, there is none. At this time, the committee will recess. It will not adjourn. We'll recess and have lunch, and then we'll reconvene. We'll try to do it by 1:30 if that's agreeable to everyone. Okay? Let's go eat lunch.